Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Making Waves with WWETT podcast. In every episode, you'll get a glimpse into the latest news, insights, and the real people who are making waves in the wastewater industry. Plus, you'll hear the stories and some of the behind the scenes secrets about how WWETT comes together. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Bothwell from Waste 360 and WWETT. And today I'm chatting with Brad Bisnette from Cole Publishing. Hey, Brad. Thanks for being here.
Hey Liz, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad you're here because we need the inside scoop on the origin of WWETT and all that you're doing.
Sure, I'll do the best I can to fill you in on everything.
All right, so you're with Cole, like I said, Cole Publishing, the previous owner of WWETT. So I'd love to hear a little more about that origin story, and please educate me.
Sure. I work for Cole Publishing, which is owned by Bob Kendall. Bob founded the WWETT Show, which was previously, it's gone through a few name changes. When I started, when I started in fall of 2007, almost about this time in November in 2007, so about 15 years ago. And at that time, it was called the Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo International. Which then changed to the name changed to the WWETT Show, which stands for Water and Wastewater Equipment. What is it now? Geez, Liz, I'm out of the game here. Water and wastewater equipment.
Technology and transport.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, holy, I am out of the game. I've just been calling it the WWETT Show, not thinking about what we renamed it to for a while. But yeah, when I started, it was the Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo International. And that had changed. It changed name a few times prior to that. Kind of really evolving with the publications that we have is kind of how the show changed. How the show changed name. So at the time I started, Pumper Magazine and Cleaner Magazine were really the two big flagships. Hence the Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo International. And at that time we were in Louisville when I started working for the company. And times have changed a lot. So when I started in November 2007, and I walked into the office and they put a stack of about 200 paper registration forms on my desk and said, "Here you go, start entering them." Because at that time, that's how people registered for the show. It was all by paper. So within about 3 years of that, there were no more paper registration forms. Everything moved online. So times have changed quickly.
Oh, big time. And I mean, it evolved, right? Like, I mean, it started um, pumper, septic, sewer. I mean, you've seen it all change, though. You've been there for the ride. How has the
Oh,
industry
for
evolved?
most of it, yeah, for most of
Yeah.
it. I mean, the industry's changed a lot. A cool backstory as to kind of how the show started. I guess I'll give everybody. Bob, like I said, Bob owns Cole Publishing. Him and his friend Pete Lawan, kind of pretty fresh out of college, really at the time. This would have been they started Cole Publishing back in 1979. So we're going back a little bit farther than myself, really. Pete owned the one septic truck in town, so he was the septic pumper, and decided that he wanted to sell his truck and upgrade to a newer truck. But he didn't want to sell the truck to anyone in town because it would be instant competition. He was the only one that had a septic truck anywhere nearby. So business was good for Pete, and he didn't want to create instant competition. So him and Bob are just buddies, like I said, pretty fresh out of college. Tried to just brainstorm and figure out where it would be the best place to sell this truck, and they couldn't figure it out. There was no newspaper, there was no magazine. They didn't want to put it really the only place to sell it was to put it in the local paper, right, in a classified ad, and that was not what Pete wanted to do. So they looked around, they made some phone calls, didn't really have a good idea, and then all of a sudden one of them kind of looked at the other and said, there's no magazine for this, there's no newspaper for this, there's no anything. Why don't we just start one? So they started the Midwest Pumper, was the original publication, which is now Pumper Magazine, but Midwest Pumper was the original newspaper. It was a newspaper. I don't know how often they put it out, but that's what they did, and it was local to like Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan. I mean, just upper Midwest, basically.
Mhm.
and it just took off because there was nothing like that, and so their timing was right, and manufacturers jumped on board very quickly to advertise, and pumpers all across the Midwest were trying to do what Pete was doing, sell their truck, but they didn't want to sell it in their own town, right?
Uh-huh.
So things just kind of went crazy really fast, and one of their advertisers, I think it was Cape Cod Biochemical, they're out east. I think they were the ones that had jumped on board right away with advertising, and at some point within the first year said, why don't you guys do a show? Like, there's nowhere for this industry to just get together and hang out and, share stories and share expertise and grow customer base and everything. So they drove down to Bob was in his mid-20s, and they'd heard about the Opryland, but they'd never been there before. So they drove down to Nashville because they just thought, in theory, that sounds like the right place to do it, and rented a space in the Opryland, and I think they had like 40 or 50 exhibitors the first year. I mean, pretty good for a first-time show, and like 100 attendees, and then like I think Bob told me, like the next year it basically quadrupled, because again, their timing was right, and they recognized where there was not a flaw, but just a lacking, central location for this industry, and people just latched onto it. People went bonkers. So now we sit here in 2022 with the WWETT Show.
Amazing. I love that. And I love that it started with a need, right? He had a need and he figured out how to do it, and then it just grew and grew. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it was two guys sitting around going like, well, how the heck are we gonna figure this out? And why don't we just do it ourselves, and here we sit. So pretty cool.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. And wait, so when did it move to Indy?
Oh boy, let's see here. Now you're gonna really make me rack my brain. The show started in Nashville, like I said. In Cole Publishing was founded in 1979 by Bob and Pete. The show, I believe, the first show was 1981, and it was in Nashville at the Opryland. The show moved in and out of Nashville a few times, basically as the Opryland grew itself. The show outgrew the convention center. They moved away. They'd add on to the Opryland. As soon as the Opryland had space, the show would move back, because they just kind of had a relationship there that they loved. And if you've ever been to the Opryland, you'd understand why. It's a pretty cool place. So I think it was there the first 3 years. They had the show, and I apologize, but I'm not gonna get the years right, so I'm not gonna even try. But they moved out in Nashville. They went to New Orleans for a couple of years in the dome there where the Saints play. They went to Biloxi, Mississippi for a couple of years, and again, in between all of these, they always went back to Nashville. So it might have gone to New Orleans, back to Nashville, to Biloxi, back to Nashville. And then there was a run in Nashville where they didn't leave for about 20, I want to say it was like, give or take 25 years. We'll just call it 25 years. That they didn't move away from the Opryland. And then at some point, let's see, I started in 2007. In November, the first show in Louisville would have been the 2008 show. So they moved. When I started, we were getting ready for the first show in Louisville. We were there from 2008 until 2011 or 12. Let's see. Like I told you, you're really going to test my brain here for a minute. I think 2011. I think we were there for 4 years. So 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. 2011 would have been the last show in Louisville, and then we moved to Indianapolis in 2012. Kind of on a whim. But we always joke and say no matter where we would have gone after Nashville, everyone would have hated. And hate's a strong word, but everybody was so used to the Opryland. I mean, it was. Like Bob always jokes and says, our complaints. We basically had the complaints narrowed down to like there's not enough garbage cans and silly little things like that, because the show was just so dialed in at the Opryland. It had been there for so long. Everybody loved it. It's just a unique place. So we always joke and say we could have moved anyway. We always put out our surveys, and everybody was always really good about filling out surveys and telling us what we were doing wrong. That goes with shows, but it was always, why don't you go to Dallas? Why don't you go to Vegas? Why don't you go to Orlando? Everybody had all these ideas, and we always joke, because we're like, no matter where we would have gone after Nashville, it just wouldn't have been the right place, because everybody loved it there. But the show needed to expand. It was just the show was too big. We were confined in the Opryland. We had a long waiting list of exhibitors. We could only handle so much education just because they just didn't have the space anymore. And so we moved to Louisville to expand. Like I said, no matter where we went after Nashville, everyone wasn't going to love it as much as Nashville. But Louisville was great. The huge convention center there. Louisville has since made some changes to their downtown area. At the time, they didn't have the big Yum Center downtown, which is their big arena that they built on the river there. They didn't have it when we were there. But they had the big convention center outside of the downtown area. They had 4th Street Live was kind of new for them. Big kind of entertainment district downtown. So we did have some fun there. Went through some growing pains because honestly the show just it expanded. Like I said, there's a huge waiting list for exhibitors. There's a huge waiting list for education. So we went to Louisville, and basically new city with a show that was almost twice the size that was before. And so, you learn through some of those things. Honestly, it was cool. We really kind of settled into Louisville over the next few years. And Indianapolis kind of on a whim called me, and a guy, Dustin, there that ended up being our sales rep, said, did you know we're having the Super Bowl? Did you know we're expanding? And yada, yada. And Bob said, there is no way I'm moving this show further north. There is absolutely no way we're moving this show further north in February. But I was kind of intrigued. I'm a sports guy, so I was kind of intrigued by like, how is Indianapolis going to host the Super Bowl?
Right.
It is kind of, like, it was just kind of like, well, I grew up in Chicago, and I mean, I know where Indianapolis is. Like Chicago couldn't handle a Super Bowl with the weather there, and they got Soldier Field outside and stuff. And Indianapolis at the time would, they had a new stadium that with Peyton Manning being there, the Colts kind of blew up, and I was still in my head thinking like, the Super Bowl's going to Indianapolis, what the heck, and but they were building in the middle of building a new hotel. The JW Marriott was under construction, and Dustin had a good enough sales pitch to talk us into stopping, at least on the way home back to northern Wisconsin, on the way home from Indianapolis. And we stopped and kind of were like, wow, they're doing a lot of things the right way here. At the time that convention center was under construction, they doubled the size of the convention center. They were building a big host hotel. They had the downtown all connected via the skywalks and everything, and all the restaurants. Lots of cities, you go to downtown to like the convention district, and sometimes it's like, Liz, you've been around to a lot of shows. Sometimes it's not that easy to eat. Like there's just not, like, it's really like you're in the convention center and there's nothing else around it. Indianapolis was extremely centralized. They had everything connected. Like I said, they're building a new hotel. The show that was going on when we went to visit was the FDIC, which is a big fire truck show. So there was a lot of similarities with the equipment that they had at that show, with the WWETT Show. A lot of water trucks for the fire guys, for the firemen and things like that. So it was a good. They brought us in at the right time to kind of show us how they could handle that equipment. And like I said, the downtown's just so convenient. And Indianapolis has such a good attitude about shows. Like I'll remember one thing they said. One of the employees for the city, when we were sitting there, they're like, we don't have mountains, we don't have lakes. Like, these are our mountains and lakes. Our convention center and our downtown area is what we have to brag about, basically. And they've done an awesome job with it. So we kind of, like I said, Bob was so against moving the show further north, but we talked him into it, and it was the right move. It's been great in Indianapolis. We absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's so good to hear. And I mean, you're right that when the Super Bowl was there, they built like a community, right? I mean, it really
They
was.
did, yeah.
Well
The contractor that we worked with, basically, they built like a whole. I mean, it was crazy. They built like a whole outside facility to be able to move people from the convention center to the stadium, and a lot of things kind of blew up when they had that Super Bowl there. It was pretty cool. The town, I mean, the city rallied around it, and a lot of people were like, really? But they did it the right way, and then now they're reaping the rewards from it, because now they have the infrastructure to handle big shows like the WWETT Show. So.
Right. And I hear even the restaurants are expanding. It's become quite the little cultural stop.
Yeah, I mean, our first show there was in 2012, like I said, and there's so many more hotels there since since we were first there, there's so many more restaurants. They just keep kind of rallying around that downtown district. And it's great. They're doing things the right way. They do have, I mean, they had previously before the WWETT shows there, they had big events there like the Indy 500 and things like that. So they've always been able to handle the crowds, and they know how to move people, but they've just continued to just make the right calls around the downtown area, I think.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait for my first WWETT show.
Yeah, it'll be fun. You'll enjoy it. Yeah, because actually I wasn't even thinking that. Yeah, we you and I didn't really start talking until the spring, so I wasn't even thinking that you hadn't been there yet. But yeah, you're every single show you go to, you walk around, and I tell people all the time, unless you're really kind of involved in the industry, every show you walk around, you go every 100 feet or so, you walk past some piece of equipment, and you think to yourself, what in the heck is that for? You got to stop and watch a demonstration. There's some pretty cool stuff, pretty awesome stuff around the show.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Good. Well, so tell me, so I think it was Chrissy, for our listeners, that's our show manager on WWETT. She was telling me a story of one year, some special brew was made. Do you remember that? And can you talk about that? Some sort of tasting was created.
We did a yeah. So I got to recommend. You caught me off guard with that one. So we did a story in our TPO magazine, which is Treatment Plant Operator, about just, we kind of got wind that there was a few different treatment plant facilities, that handle drinking water, cleaning water. And we kind of got wind that there were some water operators that were using their treated water, clean water, like I said, drinking water, to make beer, like just home brew masters kind of deal. And one of our editors got a hold of it and ran a little article. And Jeff, who's president of Cole Publishing, said, wouldn't it be cool if we did like a beer tasting at the WWETT show? And to be honest, we live in northern Wisconsin, and there's not a lot of things to do in the winter, so we all like our beer. So we advertised a little bit and kind of asked people to enter the contest. And we had like a half a dozen, independent brewmasters that were also water operators from around the country enter themselves into the competition. So we held it over at Lucas Oil Stadium. It was one of the first. We didn't always use the stadium. The football stadium is actually connected to the convention center underground. There's a tunnel. You can take some escalators down and kind of go avoid the elements and go into the parking lot and come up into the football stadium. Pretty cool setup in Indianapolis. And so we didn't always utilize the football stadium. We added it on, let's see, probably like 2014 or so. We added the stadium to the show. And started doing some live demos and things like that over there. And so we did the beer tasting over at the stadium. And it was kind of funny. We, of course, like, novice beer competition managers here, we didn't think to ask about ask if we were okay to do that by any means, because again, we're from Wisconsin. We just figure everyone's okay with everyone drinking beer. It's fine, right? And like 5 minutes before the competition, Jeff calls me and he's like, hey, they're trying to shut down the beer tasting. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And well, of course, you just can't just serve beer in a convention center if you're not like the contracted caterer. So the caterers got wind of it, that we were doing it. We didn't think to ask permission from anybody. They're the only ones that are allowed to serve alcohol, of course, which makes perfect sense, but we don't always think about perfect sense in our heads before doing things. So we really quick had to taste all the beer really fast and crown a champion.
Called it a day.
Before they came and shut us down. And then they called me and I said, just do it really fast. And they called me and said, I heard you're doing a beer competition. You can't do this. I don't know what you're talking about. And then the competition was over by the time I was able to explain myself. So it's all good. But yeah, we did a little. That was 1 year, so it was shut down after the first year. It was one and done. But it was fun. But yeah, we had like a half a dozen water operators from across the country enter their home brews, and it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was more. It created a bigger buzz than we expected it to. Actually, it was kind of just like I said. Some of the guys in the office were brewing beer, and it was kind of on a whim, like, like a lot of things we do. And it was just kind of like, let's try it. And we had people enter. We're like, hey, that's a great idea. And then people were all into it. We had a bunch of people over there kind of watching to see who won, and did a little write up on them after the fact in the magazines. And yeah, it was a fun deal.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the thing is, you guys were ahead of your time, because now it's so much more for the masses now. Like even on the Waste 360 side, they're talking about reusing the gray water and brewing. And I'm sure there are a
Yeah.
lot more now brewers. So maybe we need to bring this back, Brad.
I think you need to bring it back, and you need to ask more questions before you try to do the actual competition.
That's fair.
We didn't ask enough questions prior to trying to pull it off. So we tend to do that though. But like I said, co-publishing was founded on just an idea of a few buddies, and that's how the beer competition happened too. Lots of things we just trial and error, that sounds like a good idea, test it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, keep it going. So,
Hey, I love it. And it made you do it, right? Otherwise, if you asked too much, it may have prohibited it. So nice work. I like that.
That's true. That's also true. Yeah, maybe it's better to not ask questions, just run with it and see what happens.
Exactly. So since you've been on the show and with Cole, what has been your most memorable wet? Can you name one, or you don't want to choose your darlings?
Oh boy, let's see. Well, I didn't ever work for Cole Publishing when the show was in Nashville, and I'm sure you're still kind of new to the WWETT Show game. You will start to hear your Nashville comments, even though the show hasn't been there since 2007 now, 15 years now, as long as I've been at Cole Publishing. We'll still get a guy call here and there and say, well, is the show ever going back to Nashville? So that's always funny. So lots of people's favorite shows were back. They did a really big bash for the 25th anniversary, I believe. They did a really big kind of blowout bash in Nashville, and I heard that was a lot of fun for people. I think they had Trace Atkins come play. We used to always do a really big concert. So I think Trace Atkins came and did the 25th anniversary. So lots of people, if you ask a lot of people that were around longer than me, they'll say that show. But mine, I don't know. My first show in Louisville was funny because it was, like I said, the show had doubled in size in a year because we had space finally, so we could open up the waiting list, and we signed on with a new contractor. So prior to Cole Publishing, I worked for a company called C.H. Robinson, which is a big third-party logistics freight broker type of deal. And so when I came on to Cole Publishing, they threw the exhibitor side of things at me and said, you kind of have a background in this, the logistics, the move in, the move out, the equipment, you understand that stuff, so this is what you're going to handle. And the first year in Louisville was very memorable for me because it was just like I said, a lot of growing pains for everybody. The show doubled in size. We had a new contractor, we had a new facility, we had to learn everybody kind of on the fly, and so it was just, I'll never forget that one, just because everyone was kind of looking at each other like a deer in headlights, like, holy smokes. And so that was fun, just because in hindsight, we pulled it off. It was a great show. Everybody was successful. Everybody was busy. A lot of business done, and so it was kind of like a holy smokes, but after the fact, like, hey, good job, everybody.
Yeah.
One year and again, I handled the exhibitor side of things, right? So I did help with registration and education, but my main goal was just making sure all the exhibitors were happy, all happy, and all the equipment got in safe, and everybody else was safe when we're moving around 10,000 pound pieces of or 10,000 pound pumps and with forklifts, and people are walking underneath, and there's everybody's safe, every equipment's in, and then my job was complete. One year we had a huge snowstorm. I mean, shows in Indianapolis, anywhere in the Midwest in February, you never know what's going to happen, and so we had a huge snowstorm like the second day of move in, and we had a really good relationship with our contact at the facility. He knew we were always going to take care of things and not treat the building like it was our own. But that equipment's sitting outside overnight, and it's all got to come inside, right? Get polished up. Everybody's got to detail everything 5 times before the attendees walk in, wax all the tanks and shine all the tires and everything. And we were getting pounded with snow. And I
Oh,
said, come, just start moving everything in. And our contact said he had told me he was going to be late that morning. He wasn't going to be there till about 9. And the exhibitors are at the door at 6 a.m. ready to come in because that's what they do. And we had like a foot of snow overnight. So all these trucks had snow like piled on, and our contact wasn't there. And the kind of like interim contact was said, there, you cannot bring one piece of equipment into this hall with any snow on it. And we looked at each other like, well, this is going to be interesting. And so Bob, our owner of Cole Publishing, he sent some of the boys to the closest Home Depot and bought all the leaf blowers they had. And those guys were up on the trucks. We had Bob was even up on the trucks. Jeff was the president. He's up on the trucks. I'm up on the trucks. We're sweeping and blowing snow off all the trucks as they basically drove into the hall with us on them, blowing snow off in the parking lot. So you can't count that show out because that was a mess. But everything came in with no snow, and the show went on. So it was good. That's probably top of my list.
oh, it has to be. That is unforgettable right there.
Yeah, they
Oh,
called. I remember the guys called from Home Depot and said, "Bob, there's only 5 leaf blowers." He said, "Buy them all. I don't care." So
and
there we
get
were with
yourself
5
some
leaf
boots.
blowers, running back and forth to the gas station across the street to keep the gas tanks or keep the gas full in the blowers as we were driving the trucks in. So that was a good time.
Oh, amazing. If you have pictures, I need to see those. That is fantastic.
I think we were all moving so fast that we didn't even think to take a picture because we were all we were all scrambling. I can't think of seeing one picture of that episode, but anyone who was there is not going to forget it. That's for sure.
Right, exactly. Ingrained in your brain. Oh, fantastic. So you mentioned
Yeah, that was
early
good
on
stuff.
that that's awesome. So you mentioned earlier that when you first started at Cole, you were getting paper registration. So like that's just an indication, obviously, of how technology overall has changed. How do you think
Right.
technology has changed within this industry overall as well? Because you've seen a lot.
So many things. You see, we always kind of feel, or at least I feel, that you see things move a little faster, like on the sewer side of things with the cameras and the inspection equipment, and that's just by nature of the equipment, you're going to see things go faster from that standpoint. But even with just your basic vacuum trucks, with just I would say safety, like operator safety, so like wireless remotes and sensors and things like that, where that stuff wasn't really, when I first started, wasn't really thought of, and now it's like all the new trucks, you don't, if they're like, at one point it turned into it was like an upgrade. It was pretty cool to talk about having a wireless remote for driver safety. It was just a kind of like oh, they must be a pretty big operation if they got that going on. But now it's like stuff like that is just a no-brainer. It's just, you don't buy a new truck unless it has some of those safety features. So that, so it's safety for one, but then just any technology that you sit at home and you watch TV and no one has cable anymore. It's basically just live streaming and all that. Any wireless Bluetooth, just type of like everyday feature that you use when you're someone who sits in an office like me. That stuff is all incorporated into all of the equipment at the WWETT Show. I mean, from vacuum trucks, pump trucks, or vacuum trucks down to just like sewer cameras, and I mean all of that, all those everyday like luxuries that you just take for granted and don't think of. I mean, all of that stuff is incorporated into all that equipment, which is pretty cool.
That is really cool. That's great. And then is there anything that you're kind of watching that's interesting, whether it's a technology or an innovation in the industry that you're like, this is going to be big soon? Anything you can think of there?
That's a tough question, honestly. Just there's a lot of these companies, for like an attendee standpoint, a lot of them are family owned, independent,
Uh,
independent companies. They're not big chains or anything like that. They're not corporations. And so as you see, kind of, we've been watching, like I'd say over the last like 5 years, you start to see like the generational kind of turnover, right? So you have like, if it was my parents' company, and now kind of maybe I'm 41, but I'm saying like kids who coming in, like who are like somewhere between 20 and 40 years old, who are starting to take over the companies and are really moving into like all of the like utilizing the software maybe that to make business run better, or utilizing like really understanding the capabilities of, like I said, the safety features, with whether it's touch screen stuff or Bluetooth type stuff to just make jobs go faster. So, when their dad was running the company, they could pump 10 tanks in a day, but now they can pump 20 because of everything that they're kind of putting into play, if that makes sense, like
Yes.
the technology they're putting into play. I wouldn't say there's one thing that I'm keeping my eye on, but it's just kind of cool to see as the younger generations take over, how they're just incorporating things that are just making it easier to do more business, because there's
Definitely.
always going to be business to be had in the industry, that's for sure, so it's one thing that's never going away. It's like everybody saw during COVID. I mean, there's wastewater everywhere. There's people, there's this industry is in, it's an industry that definitely isn't going anywhere. So it's just kind of cool to see it evolve as younger generations take over, I'd say.
It really is. And like you said, it's essential. It's not going away, and it's just how are they getting more efficient, right? And safer. And I love that. It's come so far already.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's very cool.
Very cool. Well, this has been great, Brad. Is there anything else you want to share that you're working on or about the WWETT Show that listeners might enjoy hearing about?
Just get to the show. You got to be there. I mean, I always think back to, there's a video somewhere on YouTube still, that we did back in Louisville, and I'll never forget that. It was, I think I remember it mostly because it was one of my first shows. And Paul, who's our videographer, who still works for Cole Publishing, it was one of his first shows. And we decided that we needed to do a video just kind of talking about, just like a video, a promotional video, talking to exhibitors, talking to attendees. Why do you need to be here? Just why, why are you here? Why are exhibitors here? Why are attendees here? And Jeff, who's the president of Cole Publishing, I'll never forget a quote he said. He said, this is the Walmart for, this is Walmart for pumpers. This is Walmart for the wastewater industry. Anything you could possibly need to find or don't know that you even need is here. The things that are here, you don't even know you need yet until you're here, right? And that kind of opened my eyes, and I thought to myself, like, that's a very good way to sum things up. Because I just walked around this show for a day, and there were things here that I didn't know existed, and things that I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even know that didn't make sense before, but that makes more sense now. Like it just that comment from him really kind of summed up everything. If you everything you didn't even need, or everything you didn't even know you needed is here, and that was pretty cool. Could be a very good way to sum it up.
Oh, that's a fantastic way to sum that up. I love it. And now I'm going to go walking around with that perspective in my head. So I'm psyched.
It is. It's very true. It's everything you did. You go into Walmart and you're like, you could walk out with, $50 of stuff you didn't go in there for. And that that's not what I'm trying to say about the show, but like you said, everything you didn't even know you needed is here. And it's very true. Like I said, you walk around every 50 feet, you got to stop and look at something and think, what in the heck is that for? And that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, that's so great. Oh,
yeah,
and I'm sure
very cool.
the energy on site is amazing, right? Because really, this is where everyone connects. So I just can't wait to see that in action.
It is. There's people that we go every year, but there's people that we know that are attendees that go every 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, or they only go because their dad told them they had to go when it was his company, and he told them even if you don't need equipment, you have to go every 3 years to just see what's there, because like I said, there's things there that you didn't know you needed, and now you know you need it. But just the camaraderie, I mean, these stories that are shared, like I said, Pete and Bob founded the company because Pete didn't want to create competition in our little town in Three Lakes, Wisconsin here. But you know what? If there's someone there from 6 hours away in Minnesota, that's not a competition. But you know what? That guy has the same problem going on that Pete had in Three Lakes. And they don't have a problem sharing their insight and their expertise with a guy who, doesn't live in the town next door. That's not competition, So that's pretty cool. I like sitting around and listening to the guys who are, a guy from Wisconsin and a guy from New York and a guy from California all have the same problems, right?
Right.
And they don't, like I said, they're not sharing secrets with the competition. They're sharing secrets with guys who are across the country having the same problems, and they all just want to do better business. You know what I mean? So it's fun. The conversations that you overhear are pretty cool sometimes.
Oh, that is cool. And there is such camaraderie, right? Everyone bonds over the same challenges and they're finding solutions together. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, guys in Milwaukee, fighting sewer problems there are fighting the same problems as guys in New York and Minneapolis and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're different, but sometimes a guy in Dallas found a solution to a problem there that maybe could also be applied to something in Detroit.
Right.
Maybe it's a different problem with the same solution lots of times, so.
Definitely. Oh, well, you made me even more excited. And thank you so much for sharing the history of WWETT. It's awesome. It's such a grassroots industry. I love all the stories of the family-owned businesses, and they just have a special place in my heart. So I can't wait. I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to finally meeting you in person too. So
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it'll be fun. Like I said, I forgot. I didn't even cross my mind that we've been talking for probably about 9 months now, and I never crossed my mind that you actually hadn't been to the show before. So I'm very excited for you to be there.
Oh, me too. I'm more equipped now. Thank you. So I will see you then. I'm not talk to you much more by then, but thank you so much, Brad. I know how busy you are, so thanks.
Yeah, you bet, Liz. Thanks for inviting me.